I know. Here we go.
Good morning, Alan. How's it going?
I'm great, thank you, Alia. How are you?
I'm good. For the purpose of everybody, the reason we're laughing is because I got the wrong name first time, so we have to start again. So this is my first time actually hosting something where I'm not the guest. And I wanted to talk to you because as a communications coach who absolutely loves communication and thinks it underpins everything, I always focus on the business side of communication. So kind of peers, or if you're a business owner down like and your leadership team, etc. But obviously communication goes a lot deeper. And when it comes to our interpersonal relationships, romantic ones and otherwise, that's where I think it affects the most. So I've always wanted to talk about it, but obviously relationships aren't my forte, kind of professional ones are. And I come across your profile, and when I started talking to you, obviously I wanted to do something together. Now, I wanted to kind of start because what do you call yourself? Because we were just saying, do you call yourself a guru or an expert? And I know that's something that you're not comfortable with. So do you want to just kind of from there and tell me what you actually do?
Yeah, that's yeah. Just to fill everyone who's watching in, I'm not a fan of the term guru or experts, mainly because it implies that I've got all the answers. I haven't. I've got a lot of the questions that my clients don't ask themselves, and also from the coaching perspective, when I look at my clients and their relationships and whatever else, I see the whole picture. Whereas, as I think it was Les Brown says, when you're inside the picture, you can't see the frame,
Mm-hmm.
let alone the whole picture. Um, I call myself a love engineer. That's because there's two opposing things. Like engineering is not romantic, it's not emotional, and I have a strong engineering background. But then on the flip side, love is emotional, it's beautiful, it's a sensation. Those two things don't go together, but
Mm-hmm.
then neither do logic and emotion, yet we have both within us. So it's kind of bridging the gap between the two, if you like.
I love that. I love that so much. And what kind of made me buy into what you do, I guess, is well, from our first conversation, what I really liked was what you said about where most kind of people in your space would be talking about, what does your ideal partner look like? You kind of made it more introverted. So tell me more about your take on that, because I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, as what I see, if I flip it to more the business side, which is your arena, we look at, okay, what is your ideal client look like? Where do they hang out? What would communicate with them? And if
Mm-hmm.
we do the same thing in the intimate relationship zone, then there is this risk, shall we say, or potential opportunity to say, okay, that's my ideal client. I'm going to, or ideal partner, I'm going to twist and turn myself and mold myself into what they would be attracted to,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine in the short term, but you lose yourself in the process. And along that way, you start to resent that partner for not seeing the real you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you haven't shown it to them, how
I
can
would
they see it?
no, exactly. And I love that because I as a woman in relationships, I hate that so much. So it's kind of when when you meet somebody new and it's not the whole what do you want thing, because I genuinely know what I want, but I don't want to do what I want all the time. So it's like, what music do you want to listen to in this car journey? What food do you want to do? I don't mind, you choose. Sometimes that's okay once you actually know each other, but in the early days that's so bloody annoying, because eventually what will happen is, okay, well, we'll get to a point, I'll stop asking and we will just do what I want to do all the time, and then you're going to hate that. But I feel like people don't show themselves, or maybe they're too afraid to show themselves. I'm not sure. Obviously, that's your remit. But for me in business, and I agree with you because that's what I teach in my 4 pillar philosophy. Our first pillar is awareness. That's both awareness of self and awareness of others. And if you don't know who you are, what your personality style is, what your characteristics are, what your values are, because your values dictate your mindset, and you don't know that of your audience, and you're just freewheeling. First of all, what you're going to be saying is inauthentic because it's not you. Then you're not going to be landing the message for anybody, and it's just an absolute mess. So I really liked that those similarities in our approach, even though what we do is completely different. But kind of the same, and it's if you unpick everything, I like that we both have that angle. So I know that you were going to take us today through the similarities between dating and marketing. Is that right?
Yeah, we certainly can do. There's a presentation I put together a while back for a group called Marketing for Hippies. So I will, which I called at the time the Winning the Game of Love, although love isn't necessarily a game. But yeah, I'll just
Well, what we'll do, if you could run through it first, because I won't interrupt your flow, just in case what you're going to say later, what I was going to ask. So if you want to take us through it, and then I would love to kind of us to chit chat and go back to points. So I'll be making notes as we go.
yeah, I've just got to find the button that says present. For some reason, it's different on a Mac to on the old Chromebook.
It's usually the big share screen button right at the bottom, big old green one.
Yeah, I was actually looking for the Google Docs show the full screen thing, but
Oh, is it not
anyways,
top right?
there we go. Right, share screen. Right, winning the game of love.
Let's see.
Can you see it?
No.
Hmm. Let me try again.
There we go. Much better.
That works. Yeah, I can see both screens now.
There we go.
Okay, so winning the game of love, if it is even a game. So question is, who am I? I'm going to cover a little bit more about my background. And then the question of, is love a game? And what is the game? Who makes the rules? And the more important question we all have is, how the hell do I win? So I had a disastrous dating history. I've been on the receiving end of sexual abuse. I'm now happily divorced. I had a decade of dating and relationship coach study and research. I had a farming background, which does play into my coaching style with an engineering mindset.
That's quite
And
the
flipping these things along, the dating history has resulted in some great lessons and also bringing a lot of understanding to and compassion when I coach women or men who've had a serious experience. I can actually relate to that. And that's something that not a lot of male coaches can do. And also something that a lot of men, even if they have received it, don't talk about it. And one of the keys for me has been turning negative things into positives. I've also learned to become a master coach and NLP practitioner, and now becoming a kinesiologist also. The farming background is about sowing seeds and delayed gratification, because the changes that my clients make today, they may not see the impact of which for 6, 10, 12 months. And the engineering mindset is about getting to the root cause of whatever the issue is.
Okay.
So, what is the game? Well, what I find is that there are three approaches to dating. One, on the side, you've got the suppression, where I take my flaws and things that I don't like and I hide them away. I put myself down to make the relationship all about the other person. Whereas on the flip side, you've got that more egoic, I am better than everyone else and you will respect me. And from Stephen Covey's perspective, winning the 7 habits of highly effective people, this is a win-lose, whereas suppressing is a lose-win. But in the middle, there's that sweet spot that's sincere. The people that come from there are so authentic and composed. they just don't lose themselves whatever happens. When you approach dating and relationships from that place without that mask, firstly, the people you attract are either within that sweet spot or they don't stick around. So the game itself, the nearest I've come across to it is Snakes and Ladders, because it's about a journey. And it's a journey in a game that you don't play alone. You come across little things along the way, like knowing your love languages and setting boundaries and keeping them, that are like ladders that move you farther along.
Yeah.
But then at other times, you come across these triggers from the past. And it's like landing on a snake's head and you go backwards. And sometimes that feels like, oh, I'm losing, the game's over. No, it's just a temporary setback and you can learn from it. And so often in relationships, we like to blame our partner for whatever the heck is going on. Although a lot of the time they didn't roll the dice for us. So what are the snakes and what are the ladders? Unhealed emotional wounds, unhealthy attachments, childhood traumas, communication breakdowns, conflicting values. And the ladders would be things like love languages, fight languages, understanding your other partner's personality profile and your own, masculine and feminine energy polarity, and communication. Also inner healing. And so who makes the rules in the game of love? Some people say it's culture, law, parents. All these different things can impact our relationships and make rules and stuff. Yes, there are certain things that are against the law and should stay that way. But it's the individuals within the relationship that make up the rules within that relationship, because it's got nothing to do with anyone else. And we've already mentioned awareness on this call. And that is the first step on the ladder of getting to know somebody. And then you can get a little bit more familiar with them. You get to know and like them. You get a little bit of confidence in who they are as a person. And you learn to trust them. Now, at this point, Alia, if we look at it from the business perspective, at what point on this ladder do most people try and make a sale?
First roll.
First roll, yeah, especially in some of the networking groups you can go to.
Oh my God, business.
But the next
top.
And no, level 6 is a reliability. Number 7, they become a raving fan, or you become a raving fan of them. Not only do you have a ladder for them, but they have a ladder for you. And when I look at this, I think about the music perspective, being a rock music fan for many years. Awareness, that might be, so, okay, this song's flashed up on Spotify. I'm going to click the like button. And then you maybe listen to an album, you get to know and like them and trust them. Then up at number 7, you've got the raving fans, like in the Iron Maiden fans. They've got the t-shirts, they've got the hoodies, they go to the gigs in many different countries, they drink the Iron Maiden beer and whatever else and all this yada, yada, yada. What does it take to sell an Iron Maiden product to these guys? Nothing. Whereas someone on level 1, it would be very, very difficult. It's like, Iron Maiden, what? A torture device? What? Why do I want anything from that? Yeah.
I did. Do you know what the Conqueror's Challenge is?
I've heard of it, but I'm not particularly familiar with it.
So it's an app. It makes you run, and And you can do no numerous things. And I'm really sporty. I'm just not very good at running when I'm running for running's sake. If I'm running as part of a sport, like I play rounders or something, then it's fine. But you could do things like you could swim the channel. So you could go for a swim in the pool and you log your meters, and then it goes in. It's like, okay, you got closer to your goal, and then at the end of it, you get a medal. So I've been seeing concrete challenges for years, and it's quite expensive. And I was just like, not my cup of tea. Oh, you can leave that back on. So I
Okay.
was thinking, not my cup of tea. And I am an absolute raving Lord of the Rings fan. And I got an email through recently, and it said, "Oh, Conqueror Challenge, Lord of the Ring. Do you want to run some Mordor?" Yes, and I bought immediately just because it was Lord of the Rings, and I'm obsessed. It's the same thing that I have been seeing constantly, just thinking, nah, that's not me. So from using this relationship sense from a marketing perspective, like you were saying from the Iron Maiden, you know, as a saleswoman myself, salespeople are the easiest people to sell to, right? And I did the same, and nothing had to happen. I knew the brand, didn't like it, so I didn't trust it to buy it because I didn't want to do it because I didn't like the theory of running. But as a raving fan, it superseded all those other things, and I was like, yeah, I'm in.
Absolutely. And what I notice in the dating world is a lot of women are more inclined to want to get married
Yeah,
for that security or alleged security. I'll come back to that later, possibly. But that comes in at kicks in on number 3 or number 4. He's more likely to propose when you're at number 7 on his ladder. So it doesn't mean he's not going to, it just means
not
not
yet.
yet.
I have a question, and I know I was going to wait to the end. Do you, we could maybe ask it, and if you're going to get there, you can say we come back to it. So what I find, and a lot of people talk about, and I find this myself, is you'll meet someone, right, and there's a spark, so you've got that awareness, you go through that familiarity, you start to like them, and then you start to, I guess I wonder what my question is where people see, oh, the mask is falling off. Is it that a mask is falling off always, or is it sometimes you start to see the values and all those things that you talked about there, kind of love languages, fight languages, the personality styles, and you think, actually, this person isn't for me? Do you think it's just at that stage for that confidence where it goes one way or the other? One, I'm confident that actually we align, or I'm starting to lose confidence that we don't align because those things aren't there. So is it stage 4 that people are kind of dropping off and thinking, well, this is a mask slipping?
Um, Sometimes a mask can slip off as low as number 2, but also as well as going up this ladder, we can also come down.
Yeah.
So there's also years of evolutionary conditioning that goes on in our heads. And where the hormones go on when we meet somebody new, that excitement a lot of the time switches off the thinking mind. It's all
Yeah.
about feeling it feels so amazing.
I've had a few
But
of those.
because it feels so amazing, we look past all these flaws, all these things that could be amber flags or red flags, little things that are not quite in alignment. We let them slip because it feels so good. And it's like we've known them for years and everything's just perfect. And then over time, that fades away a little bit. And then we notice the little annoying things. And we think, oh, this can't be the person. How could I be so wrong? How could I get it so wrong? But that's actually part of the process. If you imagine like a pendulum, you meet this person, it swings that way, everything's so exciting, but then it swings back the other way. So you see both sides of them. And then somewhere in the middle, there is that sweet spot. And that in between those two extremes of those pendulum swings is where communication comes in. So if you have different communication styles or you just don't know how to communicate, then chances of getting from that side back to that sweet spot in the middle where you accept both sides as they are, not better than they are, not worse than they are, just as they are, without that depth of communication, chances are it's not going to last.
That makes sense. Well, as a is that loud or is that okay?
No, that's fine.
As a communications coach, it's really interesting because this is something that I see I get a lot of challenges with, even as a woman trying to date. So I am I don't know what the label is. I date men. That's my preference. So whatever I say isn't anything negative towards men as a whole, because I think challenges are with people, but I can only comment on men because I only date men. So just for the purpose of
Yeah.
this. And I find generally most people I speak to aren't good at communicating at all. And my standard, I guess, is still pretty low. So because I am you know, like you said, I also don't believe in the word guru, because I think when people get to guru stage, they're kind of buying into a different vibe, and it's more about the money than actually helping people when they get to that stage. But I've been a communications coach. I've been in words and in and around that space for 6 years, and so I would say I'm fairly experienced at it by now. And I do think I know more than kind of the average folk, and that's why I help others. And so when it comes to the early stages, I also neurodivergent, so my intuition picks up on this stuff very quickly. I work on personality profiling every day, so I can't help but notice people, like, where they're at. And I often find my biggest struggle is I can see this stuff and I try my best to communicate in a really open, free, calm, judgment free zone. And sometimes you almost, like, I find myself having to make that decision that this person just isn't getting it. They're not listening. They're not open to the fact that there are other things at play. And the only way out of this situation is just kind of saying, okay, you're right, let's move on. Now, for me, that goes against my values, because I don't want to be the person all the time, like, making that compromise, because eventually I will just feel used, unseen, and I'll be bitter and it will hurt. And that's kind of what's happened to me in the past, which is why I've been single so long. So, from a both a communication coach perspective and somebody that does go through this, that I do see that I have met people that, to be honest, they're not, like, I wouldn't say there's anything bad about them. Like, their values are fine. Like, we've got enough hobbies that we love, but we've got our own thing, and we bring that into the table, bring something to the table, so it's interesting. But their communication is so shit that I just can't continue.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of challenges with this, and one of which is when we go to school, we're taught to read, we're taught to write, but we're not taught to communicate.
Literally my whole sales pitch, yeah.
Yeah. We're taught about money. Well, we talk about how to add things up, take things away, talk about numbers, but we're not taught about money.
About communication.
We're not taught about relationships in any way, shape, or form. And very rarely do we even get taught that at home.
Well, most of our parents didn't know. Well, I came from a broken home.
Yeah. And another thing to bear in mind is, do you have a Android phone or an Apple?
Apple.
Okay, so you know how to work that brilliantly. So if I then give you an Android phone and say, use that, how long would it take before you start doing your nutting?
I tried that once. It took me 2 weeks. I went back to Apple.
Yeah. So there are a lot of similarities between men and women, but we have different operating systems.
Mm-hmm.
So where a man may be an Android, a woman's an iPhone, if you're trying to communicate or operate this opposing phone or opposing operating system the same way, it brings challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So when you understand the differences, it's a lot sweeter.
That's interesting. I have a opposing thought to say on that, actually, a bit of a debate. So why is it that, given the fact that I'm not just taking this as an individual, so like you say, the reason I do my coaching in the first place, like what you've said, is that we come out of school and that's it. So we just like relationships, we're just expected to navigate the workplace, but nobody showed us how, and nobody taught us how to read personality styles. I do that, and when it comes to coaching, the 90% of who I coach are men, and 90% of my clients are men. So why is it in a working space, in a coaching space, that I can understand men and I can communicate with them and they get it, that when it comes to a relationship, and obviously the stakes are higher and emotions are at play, why is that a difference?
Look, you've just answered your own question. The emotions come into it.
Right.
Because men, when they communicate, are more direct, it's logical, it's a process driven thing, whereas women have a tendency to be more emotional, more intuitive. So when you're in that intimate kind of relationship, you're communicating from that emotional place, and they're still communicating from that logical place.
Interesting. I interrupted your ladder, sorry.
That's all right. No, I'm pretty much done with the ladder, and that was the last page, apart from one where I went on to offer a free 15-minute call to, if you like, do some research interviews. So
Fair enough. So that's really cool. Thank you for taking us through that. What was coming up for me, which I wanted to kind of go into a little bit further, which I thought was really nice because it kind of fits in with that pillar that I work on. So with awareness, what we go through is we go through values, personality types, communication styles, and goals. And we can go deeper, but generally that helps give a start point. So when you were talking about kind of suppressing and supersizing and that sincere sweet spot, some of that was coming out was really interesting. So what I think would help so many people, and I don't know your take on this, maybe this is what you do with your coaching, but because to be a more efficient communicator, I have to take all my clients through this so they know themselves by the end of it. They've got a better understanding and they know how to read the room better because I teach them through the other personality styles and how they come across. Now, what would have been really cool was in school if somebody, or even our parents, for those of us that had some, I didn't really, but someone in our lives to say, right, this is who, let's uncover who you are, not tell you who you are. Let's uncover who you are together, and then you know that. And I think everybody has a responsibility to know that, because when you come into a relationship with somebody, an emotional relationship with someone, when you don't know, that can cause so many problems. When you don't know what your values are, you don't know what your drivers are. So one of the things I found really interesting, two stories I've got when it comes to values. One, somebody tried to argue with me on LinkedIn the other day. Not a good idea. About values and mindset are two different things. His argument was that they were different. My argument that one leads into the other. Because I'll talk about two examples. One, he is a traditionalist in all sense of the word. And I'm very modern in most senses of the word. So those are values, right? And what I mean by that is I live in a van and I have given up my whole life to live in this van. I still run my three businesses. We're in the van now. So I run the businesses 9 to 5, and then I go off and I adventure and I do whatever I want to do in my life. And as a modernist, that's a really cool thing to do. As a tradition, that's offensive to him. Even if he doesn't feel offended, to his core, that is offensive, because it's like, bricks and mortar, why aren't you in an office, why aren't you doing this, why aren't you getting an income, why aren't you working until you're 60, like all these traditional values that he holds dear. So what he said to me was, so you don't take your business very seriously then? Yeah, that went down well. But when it comes to relationships, that if you don't know what drives you, you're not going to know that when you sit and date, or if you're having a conversation with your other half, or you're 3 months in and they start talking about something, and you're instantly just going to, the ick, that's what causes a lot of the time, I find, is the ick, because people will start talking and you're just like, huh? So it comes down to, if you're family orientated, if you're hardworking, if you're driven, if you're not, if you're relaxed, and all those different values and all those different things that come into play, they're so important. So one of the worksheets that I was doing with one of my clients, when we were going through values, basically I listed them out, and it was like, well, highlight which ones are important to you and then say what they mean to you in your own words. So the ones that he was just said they were important, he was doing like one sentence, one sentence, one sentence. And then one of the values, he wrote like 4 paragraphs. And in the whole time we'd spoken, we'd had 4 sessions together, and we talked about the business, we talked about what he did. Not once did he mention this thing, it was sustainability. And then I started talking to him about sustainability. Oh my God, that guy lit up. You know, he was chatting, he was going on about it, he had like really thought out plans, but he didn't know that sustainability was that important to him. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, now you know what's important to you. Now you can go and talk about that. And what we found was the businesses he would clash with, amongst the other values or business owners he would clash with, were because they were like they weren't really sustainable. And so he would come into this heated and irate and not really liking them or thinking the person was a bit of a knob. They very well might be, but sometimes they might not be. It's just that our values
Yeah.
are clashing. We don't know.
Yeah. It's like one of the things to talk about with my clients is a dating iceberg,
Okay.
where above the level of the surface, you got things like the easy things to talk about, the stuff we talk about in the early days. It's like the movies we like, the music we like, making sure there's alignment there. Have we got similar senses of humor? Even though men and women's, when they put good sense of humor on the dating profile, it means different things. Because for when a man puts it, a lot of the time is he's looking for someone to laugh at his jokes, even
Yeah,
if they're not funny. And when women put it on there, she's looking for someone that can make her laugh.
genuinely.
Yeah. So those two different things actually cause a little bit of conflict sometimes.
What other?
But the stuff above the iceberg,
Yeah.
they're the easy things to talk about. Whereas the things that really cause the conflict and cause the ick feelings are the stuff below.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of which is unconscious because we don't talk about it. Things like the values, the boundaries, the masculine and feminine energies and the polarity between the two, the personality profiles, love languages, fight languages, all these things we don't talk about. So we just have this natural human assumption that everyone else will think and feel the same way that we do. And
And
when they don't, we get triggered.
I think that's so important, especially for this like call and from communication, because communication is the same, and we'll talk about relationships, but knowing that not everybody is like you, I think is like the biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
Because we don't look, I do genuinely believe, unless they are a narcissist or they are incredibly ego driven, I don't believe most people go out to cause harm, because it
No.
can be painful. It can be painful meeting somebody and not liking each other. It can be painful feeling rejected, especially if you are neurodiverse like myself and you've got extra rejection sensitivity, which really hurts. You know, I don't think anyone's going out to cause pain. And not everybody's for everybody, and that's okay. But I think, you know, knowing that people are different, like, and that probably, when I was saying before about communication clashes, that's probably what I see the most, is because people kind of project expectations onto you about,
Yeah.
oh, so you must live in a van. I had the same thing actually. Maybe he was a traditionalist. I had this guy who was like, well, you live in a van, you live on wheels, you can drive 8 hours round trip out your way to come see me because I'm going to prepare a picnic. So that's fair and balanced. And so I was like, well, no, I've got a business and stuff. You can't be doing too much if you're floating around. And that was like a projection. And what I find, and I don't know if you agree, is, you know, knowing that people aren't the same as you, people don't ask enough questions. Yeah. I think the power of questioning, and I don't mean in an interrogation way, but the power of questioning in those early stages is so important, because what I find dead and what I just don't tolerate anymore after a certain point is, if you are the one asking all the questions, really trying to get to know someone, and you're like asking these questions deeper than the iceberg, not just what's your favorite color, you know, what do you define as communication? What values do you look for in your woman? If you ask a man that, sometimes they'll open honestly, sometimes they give one word answers. And then even when they open honestly, is they'll just stop. They stop talking. They're not asking you about you, you know, just saying what about you can, you know, can be a bit repetitive, but ask a different question then, like ask something back. It's not an
Yeah.
interrogation, it's a conversation. And I think the art of learning how to actually ask questions is absolutely dying.
Yeah. Yes, I think was it Albert Einstein that said, "If I'm talking, I'm not learning anything,"
Yeah.
which is very powerful. So we have 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them accordingly. But the only way we can really get to know someone is to ask questions.
Mhm.
As you say, not necessarily in a interview style, which I think a lot of my early dates probably were.
Mhm.
Like, you learn as you go along.
You are like my twin, honestly. We've got so much in common. And I feel like it's hard because there's no clear way of doing it, because some people will then ask like 17 questions in one go, and then you'll start answering some and they'll ask more questions and ask more questions, so they're not actually listening, they're not taking it in. It's like you can't learn 17 things about somebody at once, and if we're doing that, we're only ever talking at surface level.
Yeah,
So if anybody was to take anything from this call, if that there is a lot that you've said which is, I think, really valuable to people. I really love the iceberg. I love the 3 takes of suppressing, the supersizing, and the sincere sweet spot. I think knowing that you are not the most important person in the room, and knowing that people are different, and just being open to seeing those differences and asking about those differences and understanding them. And what I would say is, and I'm sure you might agree or you might have a different take, just because you accept somebody for what they are doesn't mean you have to then be with that person. You can still make the decision.
absolutely.
But at least if you're being honest and you're receiving without judgment, then you can start to make better decisions about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, the art of questioning is dying off.
Oh
So
yeah.
is the art of listening. All
Oh,
too often we listen to, okay, how am I going to respond to this? How do I answer this? We're not hearing what goes in. We're not listening to understand. We just listen to answer.
and I think one thing I struggle with that, because yeah, I mean, to me, I used to do it a lot and I had to train myself not to do it. It's a really hard skill to learn, but you see so much difference. People feel appreciated, people feel seen and
Yeah,
heard, which is an incredible value to give someone. But sometimes because of that, not listening to listen, listening to answer, I want to think about what you said. So for a split second or few, I might just say nothing, but the other person's already filling that blank, and it's moved on and moving on and moving on. Just slow down.
yeah,
Let me think about what you've got to say, because I give a shit about what you've got to say and it's important to me. Like, yeah, I would say questioning and listening needs work.
yeah. Yeah, and also understanding the differences between the communication of somebody who's more auditory, somebody more visual, somebody more kinesthetic,
Mhm.
or someone that's more audio digital. So if they're more visual, when you say something to them, they need to make that picture in their head before they respond. Or if they're kinesthetic, it'll take them even longer to respond because they want to really feel what you're talking about before they can respond to it, and then see how their response feels before they actually tell you.
And I can
But again,
see
we
how
don't get taught this stuff in school.
you don't. And I can see how, if you, because that goes both ways, right? Everybody has a responsibility
Yeah,
to, if you don't know that about yourself and you can't communicate that clearly, these are my needs, then the other person
yeah,
isn't going to. But if you are communicating that clearly and the other person isn't receptive to that, then that's, I don't want to place blame,
yeah,
but that's kind of, that is on them.
yeah.
And I think it's kind of being understanding and patient that, because the other side of that, on top of the auditory styles, whatever it is, I think neurodivergence and also skill are another thing. So what I mean by that is dyslexia, or even
Guilty.
dyslexia, ADHD, or well, they all fall in different reasons. But what my point is, first of all, is basically people that can't write very well. So you might have someone that's not dyslexic that just isn't very good at reading and writing and spelling, and spells awfully, which is okay because
Me?
it's new. It's not a bad thing. But what I might find is, if I'm speaking to somebody that has a similar style to you, I'm not saying you, but what I found in the past, they might be really crap at texting back. Like they'll just say use one word answers. But if they are able to video call or leave voice notes, then they'll leave 10-minute voice notes and they'll really articulate themselves because they're not very good at texting.
Yeah.
So I think kind of, and I try sometimes I just think, are you just about, I do say, are you comfortable texting, or would you rather voice note? If we're on Tinder or something, they'll be like, oh, I want to voice note. And so sometimes having a bit of compassion is being able to spot that in people as well. If you can see that they're struggling, like, without saying, are you okay? Just try and think, okay, how could I maybe see if there's a more accommodating
Yeah.
way, let this person be this person.
Yeah. Plus, as you say, if you just ask, are you okay? They might be okay, just not necessarily comfortable with texting or voice notes or whatever else.
Maybe they're shy.
Yeah. And why are people shy? A lot of the time because they were bullied at school, or when they were younger, or bullied at home.
So it's like a learned behavior.
Yeah. So much of what we do as adults actually stems back to the first 7 years of our lives. And some of which I've learned through kinesiology even goes back even farther. It's when I first came across that, working with a lady called Lynn in lockdown over Zoom. She was using a pendulum and stuff, which, like, my logical mind just, I don't get this, but it was powerful. Because one of the things we looked at was the fact I felt like I didn't matter in relationships. I thought, oh, it's got to be something to do with when my family farm got sold when I was 13. So that's my future, my dreams, my ambitions, my identity sold by my family. So I don't matter. But no, it went back farther than that. It went back 6 generations to the 1850s, when a 14-year-old girl on my dad's side got pregnant and had the baby taken off her against her wishes. That stays in the DNA through the generations until it gets healed. And that's powerful stuff. So I want to work with people like, I can't work out why this stuff keeps happening to me. And then you dig into it and you find it goes back to the past. You're never going to find it logically. You're never going to find it by thinking. You're never going to find it by feeling. And one of the most powerful realizations I had initially when I went to Australia to try and run away from all my problems, I found that my problems came with me because I took me, myself, and I with me. And then after the divorce, it's like, okay, how can this happen? Why does it happen to be? And it happened with her, it happened with her, it happened with her. It's like, okay, what's the common links here? Oh, every relationship I go to, whether it's an intimate relationship, a business relationship, parental relationship, whether above or below, I take me, myself, and I with me. So if there's a common thing, trait between all of these things, that's cool because I can do something about me. I can't do anything about other people.
That's so true. I mean,
that starts the journey inwards.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I was going from, I don't mind saying, I was going from like abusive relationship to narcissist relationship to financially abusive to physically abusive. And I was just thinking, and I knew that I am always coming to onset. And I was like, what am I doing to make this happen? And I obviously I'm not at your level at all, but I've invested so much time and money in mindset coaching, therapy, like psychometric testing, just to understand myself and really understand who is Alia. And I realized this was with my last ex, and I made the commitment he would be the last knobhead I date, and that's been true so far. And I realized I had no boundaries, none. And so where I'm kind of overgiving, my empathy levels are higher than the normal. I'm always caring, always trying to look after people.
Self-protection.
Well, that, but what with somebody on the pendulum in the sweet spot, if I'm doing that to somebody in the middle, that's okay because they'll be giving back. Where if you do that for a narcissist, you look like a bloody ray of sunshine. And it's like take till I had nothing left, and then I would ignore the flags, the red flags, and I would buy into the gaslighting because my self-worth was so low.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'd be trapped in a situation I couldn't escape from because there were kids involved. And then I was just like, And I felt like 1,000 paper cuts had killed me. I felt where I normally a bloody rainbow, I felt grey. And it nearly ended me. It took me ages to bounce back from that. And after that, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so I had to learn, first of all, what my self-worth was, and what was acceptable and what wasn't. And the last time I tried to get gaslit and met a narcissist, that guy lasted 2 days. So
Excellent.
that was a big thing for me. And if I didn't do that, I've met tons of really great blokes, and they just, for whatever reason, and I'm allowed to have my reasons, they weren't the right fit, and that's okay. I've also,
Yeah,
on my journey, met a bunch of narcissists, that met a bunch of gaslighters, and I've just gone, okay, this is.
absolutely.
And I think the summary of this is, anyone listening, unless they've nailed it, which absolutely happy for them, they might do themselves some favors to take a step back and get reflective and think about, who am I and how do I show up? And I
Yeah,
think that
absolutely. Yeah, because so often we know our learned selves, but we don't know our true selves. We think, oh, I am this body, or I am the way I think I am, or I am what I feel. But we're actually so much more than that. We're not our bodies, we're not our thoughts, we're not our breath, we're not our feelings, we're not our names, we're not our careers.
we're not our
We
stuff.
are a spiritual being of some kind, living in this meat suit, having a human experience.
I love it. I love it. I think I'm good to draw a line there, so we don't over. But
We could go on very different tangent from that point.
we could, and I think we'll draw the line. But that was really useful. Thank you. I think that will add a lot of value to people. If anybody wanted to understand how to kind of dig into their awareness from a business perspective and excel in business, they can drop me a line. If anyone is to go from a relationship perspective and excel in relationships, they can obviously drop you a line, and we'll share both of
Absolutely.
our contact details at the bottom.
Yep.
Does that sound good?
Pleasure talking to you.
It's a pleasure talking to you too. Well, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for yours. See you later.
Bye.